Assalamu alaikum, this is Dr. Mona Al-Adrisi, author of the Muslim Narcissist book. In today's podcast, I'll be speaking about the Islamic understanding of a wife's submission and obedience to her husband and why the fulfillment of this role of being a submissive and obedient wife is very difficult for women today. Before I carry on, please do not forget to like, share and subscribe to this channel. Please share the video with whoever may really benefit from this. There's so much more content to come. So please help me grow this community by sharing this knowledge to help it get to those who are in need of it. So this is a massive controversial subject that people are debating every single day. They're debating it, arguing it, fighting each other over it, and there is no real solution at the end of it, right? We just constantly see these debates on YouTube about the wife's obedience, the wife being rebellious, the wife being disobedient, and there just seems no end to this debate. And it's a debate that is often started by red pill Muslim men and women who are absolutely fed up of having to deal with misogynistic Muslim men and men who are control freaks, okay? So I'm going to break this down today and highlight the issues for both men and women. This is not an attack on men and it's not an attack on women. I'm going to be addressing both sides in this podcast so people can come to a clearer understanding of where the grey area is in this subject field, all right? So I'm addressing this subject today as a follow-up from my previous podcast about toxic patriarchal societies, because I found that the two subjects kind of tie in together of a problematic Islamic upbringing and then, men and women going into toxic marriages after that. So I wanted to postpone this one for later, but I thought it's best to do it now so that all of this makes sense. So please, if you haven't listened to my previous podcast about a problematic Islamic upbringing, please do listen to it because it will help you make so much sense of the marriage that you're in right now and potentially the marriage you could get into. All right, so please do listen to that. I know it's long, but I promise you're going to benefit so much from it. And inshallah, it might even save you from marrying the wrong person, because you will be able to identify where your issues lie, where your childhood traumas lie, and you'll be able to make better decisions and not choose people based on your childhood traumas. All right, so please do listen to that when you have the time and then come back to this one. So pause this one now if you haven't listened to my previous one, and then come back to this one later. So I'm going to start with explaining Ayah 34 in Surah An-Nisa. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, الرجال قوامون على النساء بما فضل الله بعضهم على بعض وبما أنفقوا من أموالهم فالصالحات قانتات حافظات للغيب بما حفظ الله واللاتي تخافون نشوزهن فعظوهن واهجروهن في المضاجع واضربوهن فإن أطعنكم فلا تبغوا عليهن سبيلا إن الله كان عليا كبيرا. So the translation is, men are the caretakers of women, as men have been tasked by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala with supporting them financially. Okay? Righteous women are devoutly obedient and when alone are protective of what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has entrusted them with. And if you sense ill conduct from your women, advise them first. Advise them as in talk to them, have healthy communication and so on. If they persist, then do not share their beds. So sleep in separate rooms, sleep in separate beds. And if they still persist with their arrogance and rebellion, then discipline them gently. But if they change their ways, do not be unjust to them. Surely Allah is most high, all great. So let's break this down, okay? الرجال قوامون على النساء. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given men the responsibility of being protectors, providers and leaders, okay? This is the Islamic patriarchal system that we are given. We know that men are to be the leaders of society, and we also know that men are to be the leaders of the household because Allah has allowed them to excel in physical abilities and other abilities that allow them to shoulder the responsibilities of, protecting, providing, and being leaders of their families and societies too. But here we're talking about the marital home. Now, if a man is not married, then he has the responsibility of looking after his sisters and his nieces and his parents. If he is married, he also has that responsibility, but he now has the extra responsibility of taking care of a wife and children he may have from her. And by the way, it's for this reason why polygamy is so difficult in Islam. But men do not understand the true understanding and responsibilities of polygamy, because if they have their parents to look after and their sisters to look after and nieces who have been abandoned by their own fathers and their first wives and their children, they wouldn't have time to take on a second, third and fourth wife. However, I'll come back to this later, maybe in another podcast, about the issue of polygamy that we're facing these days. A lot of men who are searching for second, third and fourth wives are men who do not look after their sisters, do not look after their parents, do not look after their nieces and any orphans in their family, but they're happy to go on, and take on more wives, even when they're not even looking after the first wife and the children properly. Guys, this is a complete podcast for another day, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given men the role of being qawamun. Now, if you are the only man in your family, that responsibility is going to be great. If you have other brothers, then that responsibility is shared. So the responsibility of your parents and any orphans in your family and your sisters are not just going to be placed on your shoulders. It's going to be shared amongst you and your brothers. That's how it's meant to be Islamically. So the more responsibilities a man shoulders, the more reward he'll get from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, especially if he doesn't have other men in his family to help him with those responsibilities, okay? So this is why in most cases boys are given double the inheritance of girls, because they have to shoulder the responsibilities, the financial responsibilities of many women in their families. Widowers, divorcees, orphans, parents, and so on, okay? So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is just. When he gives men double the inheritance, it's because of all the women he would have to provide for Islamically, because he is al-Qawwam. Ar-Rijal Qawwamuna ala nisa. They're given that responsibility. Women are not given that responsibility, so they get less. They get half. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala allows women to retain that money for themselves. I'm going to be speaking about this later as well. What is the purpose of that money that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala allows them to keep? There is a purpose for it. But going back to Ar-Rijal Qawwamuna ala nisa. So a lot of women say, it's not fair that men are given all this authority and that men are given all this, inheritance, when they're not fair. They're not fair and they don't spend on us like they should. And if a mahram or a wali does not take care of his sisters, his widowed and divorced sisters and so on, if he does not take care of the women in his family in the way that he should, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given him the provision and the ability to do so, then he has now stepped into oppression. He is now committing oppression against the women in his family who he is now responsible for. And by the way, a lot of men hate this responsibility. There are a lot of men out there, they either weren't raised to be real men, okay? They were not raised by good role models, good male role models, or their man children who were raised by controlling women who have been emasculated growing up. So you will find there are a lot of Muslim men out there who absolutely hate being the protectors, providers, and the leaders of families. They hate it. They don't want that responsibility. They run from that responsibility. Peter Pan syndrome, they don't like it. They don't want to be financially responsible for an entire family, let alone their parents too, and their sisters and nieces and orphans and whoever else that may, include. So just because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says Ar-Rijal Qawwamuna ala nisa does not mean that all men are going to be competent for this role. You'll get some men who will completely take advantage of this. They will use it to flex their power. They will use it to flex oppressive authority over the women in their lives, because now they believe that the women's lives lie in their hands, right? The fate of these women lie in their hands. So If the fate of these women lies in their hands, then it's up to them. I want to give you money. I want to give you help. It's up to me how much I give you and what I do for you. If you do this for me, I'll do this for you. How many men do we see these days doing that, taking advantage of them being qawamun? Because the women in their families depend on them. So many. They're ruthless and they're brutal, and they will use it to their advantage. So they will get the women in their families to do lots of things for them in return for, in return for being provided for. And then you get the second type of man, who is the man-child. The man-child is the one who is more than happy for a woman to take on this role of al-qawama. So he is the one who wants to sit at home. He is the one who is happy being a stay-at-home dad, for example. He is the one who just can't be bothered to go out there and work and make money and be a man and a protector and leader, provider. He doesn't want to do any of that. He was raised by a narcissistic, controlling woman who emasculated him, and now he's just happy looking for a loving mum. He wants a loving mum. So when a woman, independent career woman, comes along in his life, he's more than happy to marry her because she looks after him. Now, if she's got a Western feminist mindset, she won't mind being the breadwinner in that relationship. She won't mind, because she has the control. She's a control freak, and she will have the complete power over her husband and the marriage in general and all the major decision making. When a woman is the sole breadwinner, she now becomes the qawama, because she is the one who is able to make all financial decisions, because she's the one paying for everything, right? She's the one paying for everything. So that's the second type. Now the third type is the man who is happy to take on the role of being al-qawwam. However, he will use and abuse those under his authority. So, for example, we see here, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, الرجال قوامون على النساء بما فضل الله بعضهم على بعض. In this ayah, a lot of men say to women, Allah gave women this position because we're better than women. Allah made us better. بما فضل الله, with what Allah allowed men to excel in over women. This has nothing to do with men being better than women or women being better than men. Allah has given men certain qualities that allow them to fulfill their roles. So he gave them strength, because remember, back in those days, before technology and machinery, everything was done by hand. So men back in those days, were looking after animals, they were farming, they were harvesting, they were building and working in construction, and they were doing so many jobs that were dangerous for women to do. And women were not physically able to do them anyway. But that was work back in those days, that was work. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave men that responsibility of, mining and all of these things, going to look for food, hunting, because they had the physical capabilities of doing so. Women were not able to do them at all. So women had the responsibilities of staying at home, and whatever the man brought back home, so for example, if he was to bring back what he'd caught from a hunt or what he'd farmed or like foods or whatever, then the woman would take it upon herself to relieve him of the responsibility and the job of having to prepare that food as well. So it was seen as a mercy. It's not actually a woman's job to do that, but it's just how men and women work as a team. Because back in those days, people had servants. And before those days, there were slaves. So Islam came to abolish slavery in society, because in Ayyam al-Jahiliyyah, pre-Islamic Arabia, everyone had slaves. And the slaves were treated terribly. So slaves were ordered and they had to say, yes, sir. That was the role of a slave. After slavery was abolished by, the coming of Islam and the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ giving rights to slaves, those slaves turned into servants if they were not freed. So one of the charitable acts that had such high reward is the freeing of a slave. So if you were to commit a major sin back in those days, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, commanded people to free a slave to redeem themselves of the sins that they had committed. So if the slaves were not freed, they were at least given rights as servants. So now they get money in return. Now they get good treatment. Now they get accommodation. Now they get, honoured as human beings, as opposed to what they didn't have before. So back in those days, like I said, a lot of people, including the Sahaba, had servants who would help them with housework. So, even the Prophet Muhammad had a servant. Anas ibn Malik, radiallahu anhu, he was a very well-known Sahabi. The Prophet Muhammad loved him so much, and he worked as a servant for the Prophet Muhammad for 10 years. He helped his wives with household chores and so on and so forth. So I'm mentioning this because a lot of men seem to understand that a woman's job as a wife is to cook and clean and do all of these household tasks all the time, when it's not the case, okay? Because always remember that even the prophets and their companions, radiallahu anhum, all of them had, or at least most of them had, servants who would help them with housework. Why did they have servants to help them with the housework? Because they needed their wives to be free for them. They needed their wives to not be tired from doing the housework all the time. Because in Jahiliyyah times, what would happen is that the laborious house tasks were given to women. They were the ones going to wells to get water. They were the ones who were farming. They were the ones who were tired all the time from having to bake and cook and serve everyone in their community. So men used to replace these women with other wives because these wives would be no good at the end of the day. They'd be no good. They'd get old, they'd age, and they wouldn't be able to take care of themselves because of all the laborious work that they had to do on top of raising children. Raising children in itself will age a woman. Countries like Saudi, Qatar, Kuwait, Bahrain, you will find that so many Arab men raised in these countries are misogynistic and man-children, because when they get married, they do expect the woman to be a housemaid. They do expect women to cook and clean and do everything, do all the house chores with no arguing and no questioning, because they never had that growing up, or they did have it growing up and they want an extension of it from their mothers. Now, I say that the majority of Muslim men in these countries are to some degree misogynistic because most of them were raised by nannies, okay? So it's normal in that part of the world to be raised by nannies, especially when you have a narcissistic mother and she doesn't have that nurturing maternal trait in her. As soon as she gives birth to a baby, she will pass that baby straight on to a nanny. And the nanny's the one getting up for night feeds and burping and changing nappies and bottle feeding and all of that. The narcissistic mother won't even breastfeed. So most of their children go to nannies and they're raised without any of that maternal love from their real mothers. And they don't get that maternal love from their nannies because their nannies are just paid to do a job. So that's why so many Arab men grow up with serial mummy issues, because they never had that maternal nurturing growing up. They felt neglected, they felt abandoned by their mothers, and they felt pawned off to nannies because they didn't want the responsibility of looking after them. That alone can cause so much psychological damage in the minds of boys growing up because they never had a mother. They never had a mother who was actually there for them, who comforted them and loved them so much and did all of the things that mothers should do. So they grow up either wanting the mother that they never had, so they expect her to be the one who babies him and looks after him and, does all his cooking and cleaning and laundry and everything. Or he was overly spoiled by a mother growing up and he wants an extension of that. He wants that to continue. He doesn't want that to ever stop. And that's why even when you're married to a man who was overly spoiled by his mother growing up, until now he might be in his 40s and 50s and she's still doing his laundry, she's still doing his cooking, she's still, she's still doing things for him, as if he were a 5-year-old. So Arab men in particular fluctuate between the two, and you'll find that the majority of them do have this need to always be nurtured by a mother role. So it has become like a cultural requirement for a woman to step into the role of being a maid, a nanny, and doing all of these household chores all the time without having any help, because this man wants to feel like he's got the mother he never had, or an extension of the mother he's always had. It's never been, an obligation upon a woman to be that, to have that role. But again, patriarchal cultural societies have molded women into that role. They've molded women into that role, when a woman should actually be more free in order to give her energy to her husband and to her children. So here Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, الرجال قوامون على النساء بما فضل الله بعضهم على بعض وبما أنفقوا من أموالهم. So بما أنفقوا من أموالهم completely, makes it clear that a man has that authority because of the money that he spends on looking after his women. Now, the more money he spends on looking after his women, the more he's going to get out of it. So if he can provide a woman with help around the house, maybe by hiring maids, even if it's just once a week, it's still help. It's still help. So if he can give a woman and his mother, for example, even if he hires a maid for his mother, his elderly mother, this is a part of him being a qawwam, because he is now showing mercy. He is now utilizing the money that he has into something good, into making the lives of the women around him as comfortable as possible if he can afford it. If a man cannot afford to look after all the women in his family, then here women need to have mercy for that man, especially if he is a good man. He's a good man who treats everyone well. When women take on the tasks of housework and, helping the man out, maybe contributing, helping him with finances, then it's now considered as a charity for these women. So there has to be a balance of mercy here. If a man can afford it, by all means, he should offer as much help as possible to the women in his family, because he'll get a lot of reward for that mercy. And if he's unable to afford it, but he's a good man, then the women compensate him by helping him out and not making his life even more difficult, and not putting him under a lot of pressure. So the ayah goes on to say, فَالصَّالِحَاتُ قَانِتَاتٌ حَافِظَاتٌ لِلْغَيْبِ. So Allah says the righteous women are devoutly obedient, and when alone are protective of what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has entrusted them with. Now, what does this ayah mean? So there is a hadith by Abu Hurairah radiallahu anhu, where he says that the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam said that it is not lawful for a woman to fast voluntarily without the permission of her husband when he is at home. The reason for that is because fasting diminishes sexual desire. So if your husband comes home and he wants intimacy and you're not really feeling it, you have no energy for it because you've been fasting all day, and it's a fast that's not an obligatory fast, it's a fast that's, from min and nawafil, then a wife should not fast voluntarily without asking her husband if it's okay. Maybe he's going to be home really late that day, maybe he'll be away. He doesn't mind. He doesn't mind if she fasts because he's not in any need of any intimacy. However, if he is, then it's going to be a problem for him if his wife takes on a voluntary fast and is not in the mood for any intimacy later. And this is not just for women, this is also for the men. So a man also has to respect the rights of his wife and not choose to voluntarily fast when his wife may want intimacy. He may not have the energy to be intimate with her if he also takes on, the charitable act of voluntary fasts. There has to be mutual agreement here for that. And then the hadith goes on to say, and she should not allow anyone to enter his house except with his permission. So obviously this will include men who are not mahram, even men who are mahrams. Maybe the man doesn't like them. Maybe the husband really has an issue with someone who's insulted him, someone who doesn't like him, someone who is always disrespectful towards him, and that could be your brother, that could be a woman's brother. So before allowing that man into the house, it's just respectful, to inform the husband, look, I would really like my brother to come and visit. I know you and him don't get along. Would you prefer that I go and meet him outside the house? Or are you okay with me inviting him to the house? When you know that your husband has serious issues with somebody, just ask him. Ask him, is it okay if this person comes to the house? Or would you rather I meet them outside? Because the issue is with him and that person and not you and that person. So he should not stop you from seeing your brothers or seeing your parents or seeing whoever if you don't have an issue with them. But if he's now forcing you to have an issue with the same people, you've got a problem here, because now it's involving family ties. But if he is the one who doesn't want to see them, I don't like that person, I don't really fancy sitting with them today, then that needs to be respected. You can't invite people to your house for sleepovers like your sisters and their kids if your husband's not up for it. It's his house and it's your house at the end of the day. It's supposed to be your sanctuary, your peaceful place. If he's not all right with it, don't force him to, take that responsibility on of having to entertain people in his home who he doesn't like or who have been disrespectful towards him. And the opposite is also true. Okay, the opposite also applies. Don't force your wife to entertain your family who are disrespectful towards her. Do not bring all your friends around to your home and then expect that your wife cooks for everybody because you want to show off and show everybody, oh, look at my wife and what she's able to do. By the way, last minute call, by the way, my friends are all coming on Friday. I need you to cook me a banquet. I need you to cook me this and I need you to make me this and I need you to prepare these desserts and I don't want you going out anywhere because my friends are coming over and I need you to be there to make all of this stuff. That's not Islamic behavior. You also need the permission of your wife in this situation, because the element of mercy, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us that marriage is mawadda, sakan, rahmah. Mawadda, deep love. Sakan, sanctuary and peace and security. And rahmah, mercy. There has to be mercy in this home. You cannot burden someone with something like that, especially when it's last minute. Ask her, are you okay with me inviting my friends and you making that amazing dish that you always make, that everyone loves? If not, it's okay, I'll just order food from outside. But if you could do it, that would be great. And I'll give you some notice, I'm giving you a week notice or a 2 weeks notice. Believe me, she'd be more likely to be okay with that than if you were to just drop it on her last minute, because it's an expectation. And the opposite is true as well. And then the last part of that hadith is, and if she spends on his wealth on charitable purposes without being requested by him, he will get half of the reward. So what a lot of women used to do is because they are dependent on their men being financially responsible for them, they would also take from that man's money, from their husband's money, to spend on charity. They might give it to their families who are in need of the money. They might give it to orphans and maybe charitable companies like Islamic Relief or something, without telling the husband, because to them it's a charity. You need to ask for a husband's permission before spending his money on charity. And if you spend money on charity, then he will get half of that reward, because you're spending it from what he's earning, right? And you need to ask for his permission because he may have a budget in mind for other things, and you may ruin the budget by spending certain amounts of money on charity, even if it's not charity. It could be other things you've bought for the house or bought for yourself that now creates an imbalance in the budget he's got for the family. So these things always need to be discussed. Finances need to be discussed all the time, because an imbalance in finances can cause a man to be really stressed, and then that will make a woman unhappy and so on and so forth, and it will just cause those marital problems. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has entrusted women to protect themselves. You protect yourselves from other men. You don't have male friends that you hang out with. You don't speak to men behind the husband's back. You don't flirt with other men. You don't allow other men into your home, and so on and so forth. So you're protecting your chastity as well, right? And again, this is applied to men. Men also need to protect their chastity. They also need to lower their gaze. They also need to protect themselves from bad women who will target them when they're outside of the home. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is not just addressing the women here, because men are also supposed to be protective of themselves. But here, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is just emphasizing on the greatness of a man who shoulders all of his responsibilities. So in return for a man shouldering all of these responsibilities, a wife needs to be respectful and, respectful and submissive to his requirements. So if he doesn't like somebody in particular and he doesn't want you associating with them, and he's got valid reasons for that, then out of respect you would honour him, because he's already doing a fantastic job of being a protector, a provider, and a leader. You respect him, you look up to him, you admire him. And, the protection of a husband and a wife also, it includes not revealing their secrets. Not revealing their secrets, not revealing the marital problems that you have, like the petty quarrels and things like that. I'm not talking about things that are serious, like if a man beats a woman. No. I'm talking about the petty things that, if you were to tell other people about the petty arguments you have, they would get a bad impression of the guy. They will look at him and not respect him. So, be careful of what information you give out to other people about your husband or wife, because it really can affect how people see them. And then when you get over those petty arguments, you will get over those, but the people who you've told about your petty arguments, they're not going to ever forget, right? And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in this ayah goes on to say, and if you sense ill conduct from your women, advise them first. If they persist, do not share their beds. But if they still persist, then discipline them gently. All right? So what kind of women are we talking about here? The women who are persistent in disrespect. Who are they? I would say that these women fall into two different categories. The first category would be narcissistic women. Narcissistic women are those women who, no matter what you do for them, they're never happy, okay? There is a hadith narrated by Abdullah ibn Abbas, radiallahu anhu, where the Prophet Muhammad said, I was shown hell and I have never seen anything more terrifying than it. And I saw that the majority of its people are women. So the Sahaba said, why, O Messenger of Allah? He said, because of their ingratitude. It was said, the Sahaba said, are they ungrateful to Allah? He said, no. They are ungrateful to their husbands and ungrateful for good treatment. If you are kind to one of them for a lifetime and then she sees one undesirable thing in you, she will say, I have never seen anything good from you. You are useless. Narrated by Bukhari. Okay, this is Bukhari, Sahih Bukhari. So, the first category of women who will be rebellious and disrespectful and persist in being disobedient and, not submissive to this, the needs and requirements of the husband, there will be narcissistic women. Because a narcissistic woman is never grateful for anything. Never grateful for anything. And you will often find that the codependent men are the ones who really struggle dealing with narcissistic women. And narcissistic women will demand and demand and demand, and a husband will do everything. He will bend over backwards. He will give her the world and everything in it. However, if you make one mistake with a narcissistic woman, she will be quick to brand you as someone useless. You've never made me happy anyway. You've never done anything for me anyway. Everything that you've done is standard. Everyone does this for their wives. You've done nothing special. You have done nothing to make me believe that you love me. You have done nothing to prove that you are worthy of everything that you require of me. This is what a narcissistic woman will say. In order to get you working harder harder for her. Now, this hadith could indicate that towards the end of time, there will be a very high number of narcissistic women. If the majority of women are in the hellfire because of them being ungrateful to their husbands, then this is an indication that we are now witnessing a massive increase in narcissistic Muslim women. All right? So that's one. That's one category of women. No matter what you do for them, you will never make them happy. They're never happy with anything. They're not happy with themselves, which is why they can never be happy with you and what you do for them. Nothing is ever good enough. Nothing is ever good enough for a narcissistic person, whether it's a man or a woman. And then you get the second type of woman who finds it very difficult to be submissive and obedient to her husband. Who is she? This is a woman who is being oppressed and abused by her husband. Okay? Now, there is a hadith of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ where he says, if I were to order anyone to prostrate to anyone, then I would order the wife to prostrate to her husband. Okay, this is reported by Tirmidhi. Now, there is a huge issue with the understanding of this hadith amongst red pill Muslim men. Okay, the first category of women we understand. Narcissistic women, we understand why they would be rebellious and are absolute pain to deal with. The second category of women fall into the problem of not being able to be submissive women for various reasons. Okay, the first reason would be they choose men for the wrong reasons to marry. Okay, they choose men for the wrong reasons to marry. They do not marry men who are potential amazing leaders. They might marry a man because of his good looks. They might marry a man because he's wealthy, he's a good provider. You know, he's protective, he's a bit of a control freak. They see that as protection. Okay, cool. But what they don't look at is his ability to lead. And a man's ability to lead lies in his emotional intelligence. If a man does not have emotional intelligence, he will never be able to lead properly, ever. Because a man who has no emotional intelligence will only lead from his ego. Only lead from his ego. Because a man who leads from his ego in marriage, he is going to be someone who will completely take advantage of his authority and his leadership, right? His leadership role. He will constantly remind a woman, I'm the man, I'm the husband, you do as I say. Whether you like it or not, you will do as I say. I can't tell you how many times I heard this when I was married. Every time I wanted to do something, I'd get a no, and then I'd ask why. He'd say, because I'm the man of the house. If you don't like it, go argue with your God. That's what Allah told you to do. You obey me, no questions. I'm the man, I get to tell you what to do. I'm the man, I'm the provider, I'm the qawwam. You tell me yes, sir. You don't ask me why. I don't owe you any explanation. You owe me complete blind obedience. This is how a lot of men understand their role of qawwam, just because they're providers. And then they wonder why a lot of women prefer to be more feminist and prefer to have their careers and focus on their careers and their own financial independence, because a lot of men they come across who they've been married to have used their position of being al-qawwam and financial provider to use and abuse women. Because I'm the provider, I get to tell you this. Because I'm the provider, I get to order you about. Because I'm the provider, I get to say whatever I want to say, and I don't even have to justify myself. Says who? Do you know hundreds and hundreds of people came to ask the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ thousands of questions? He was in a place of authority. He was a prophet. He was a prophet who came from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He was a prophet who had a fantastic friendship with Jibreel alayhi salam. Just that alone will blow your mind. That his closest companion was Jibreel alayhi salam. And people still came to ask him questions. He did not say, I'm a prophet. How dare you ask me questions? If I tell you I'm a prophet, you listen to me. You listen and take everything I say at face value. You listen to me, because if you don't listen to me and I'm telling you I'm a prophet from God, then you're disrespecting me. He never said that to his people. Every time someone came to him with a question, why, Ya Rasulullah, can we not do this? Why, Ya Rasulullah, do we have to do this? Why, Ya Rasulullah, do women have to do this and men not do this? He was patient with everybody. He answered everyone's questions. This is why we have massive volumes of hadiths in Bukhari and Muslim from all the questions that people ask the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ about why they should and shouldn't do things. And then you get a husband coming along thinking he's better than the Prophet, or fathers coming along thinking that they're better than the Prophet by making you believe that they don't owe you an explanation for saying no. They don't owe you an explanation for why they've banned things for no reason whatsoever, just because they're enjoying the flexing of their muscles and, their ego running the show. They love that power because they're control freaks. A lot of men out there are control freaks, whether men like to hear it or not. There are a lot of men who were never respected by their mothers, by their siblings growing up. And when they get to adulthood and when they finally find a woman who's quite timid, submissive, they're like, this is brilliant. Now I flex my authority on this poor little timid woman who is going to obey me whether she likes it or not. I will have full power. I will stop her doing everything she loves. I will stop her working. I will make her beg for 10 and 20 pounds and make her justify all her reasons for having 10, 20 pounds. Because I've stopped her from working, I want her to be completely dependent on me, so I can humiliate and degrade her. And not just that, I'll slap her about with a few hadiths here and there, like this one. If I were to order anyone to prostrate to anyone, then I would order the wife to prostrate to her husband. This hadith has been taken so out of context by abusive men, because not only is prostration forbidden to any human being, right? Prostration has been safe for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And the reason why prostration has been safe for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because you have to love Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala more than anyone else in this dunya. Anyone else in this dunya. So prostration is for two things. Okay, for two reasons. Number one, love, the deepest kind of love. And number two, respect. When Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala requested al-malaika, the angels, and Iblis to prostrate to Adam alayhi salam, it wasn't because Allah wanted them to worship Adam. Allah requested them to do that out of respect for this masterpiece of a creation that Allah had presented to them. The same as, Yusuf alayhi salam, when, his people used to prostrate to him. It was out of respect. So it means that prostration is for those people who you really respect and admire. Like, you're so in awe of that person that you would feel the need or the want or the desire to prostrate to that person out of respect. It's a respectful thing. People used to prostrate towards those who were who they held in awe. And the second thing, they used to prostrate to those who they love so much. So the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ knew that a woman's love for her husband, for a really good, loving, caring husband, can reach the level of prostration. It can reach the level of prostration because if you look at how women in love are with their men, you will see that they go above and beyond. They will do crazy things for love. If a woman really loves her husband, she will do crazy things to express her love. Men used to do the same. Men used to worship the ground women walked on. And this is exactly where this term comes from. The term, she loves him so much, she worships the ground he walks on, or he worships the ground that she walks on, comes from love and respect. So here, the hadith, it's not talking about the degradation of women, the humiliation of women who have to bow down to tyrannical people, no. Or bow down to people who are better than them, no. Or to bow down to men because they have a higher authority, no. It was out of love and respect. Because always remember that just because someone obeys somebody doesn't mean that there's love and respect there. It could be fear and being forced into it. Some people obey others because they're terrified of punishment and consequence if they don't. Or it's just out of pure fear and intimidation. Or it's out of, they resent that person. They'll resent the person who they have to obey, and they hate them. So just because someone is, obedient, or they show obedience to anything, it could be obedience to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Just because someone prays and just because someone fasts in Ramadan does not mean that their obedience is out of love and respect. This follows on from my previous podcast. It depends on how someone was raised. If people were forced into Islam, or they were raised with a harsh understanding of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and Islam, yeah, they'll be obedient, but not because they want to. It's because they fear going to hell, or they fear, punishment and being cursed. But when you're obedient out of love and respect, you're a completely different person. And that person becomes a completely different person. The person who you're holding in awe is the one who will change because of how much you give them that love and respect. So the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, he was the role model for men. Okay, when it came to, men being husbands and so on and so forth, the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, he set the example of how a man should be as a husband, and all his wives had no problems with him. All his wives adored the bones of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, especially Khadija radiallahu anha. Why? Because he was fair, because he didn't mind anyone asking him questions. If he would say no to something, and his wife had a problem with that, and she would, can you tell me why that's not, can you tell me why that's not allowed? Can you tell me why you're not happy with that? He would be more than happy to explain. He didn't get offended. He didn't have his ego hit. How dare you? Not only am I your husband, I'm the prophet of God. How dare you ask me a question? He never said that. He was more than happy to answer people's questions because he knows it's human nature. Humans are not slaves. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He gave us Islam to free us from being enslaved by people. When a husband comes and says, you obey me whether you like it or not because Allah told you to, you're now in a slave-master relationship. I'm sorry, but you are. Because you now have no freedom. You are now stripped of your free will to be with that man because you want to be with that man. You now feel forced to stay with that man, especially when you know, or he knows, you've got nowhere else to go. Your family are the same. Your family are all tyrannical. You come from a family of tyrannical, narcissistic men. You don't want to go back there. He knows that very well. So he is now playing on the power that he has of stomping his feet everywhere. I'm the man of the house. I'm the man of the house. And you will do as I say. And if you are not obedient to me, I'm going to threaten you with a second wife. If you are not obedient to me, I'm going to divorce you, because he knows it terrifies her to be divorced because she's not nowhere to go. If you are not obedient to me, you will get kicked out and you will never see your children again. Are you telling me this is a Muslim? This is an obedient, servant of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? Are you telling me that this is a believer? Or a descendant of Abu Jahl? This is a descendant of Abu Jahl. Because it comes from ignorance. Men who are like this are ignorant and they don't have that iman in their hearts. Because no one wants to ever feel like they're a slave when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala freed us from being slaves to anybody. Look, when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave us the option of hijrah, okay, the Prophet Muhammad, he explained it. He said, if you're living in a country where you do not feel safe, you cannot be a practicing Muslim, then make hijrah. Hijrah could be to another town, another city, another country, because you as a human being have the ability and the freedom to choose who you want to be led by. You can go and be led by another government that you're more comfortable with. You can go and move to a Muslim country where you feel happier as a Muslim. I am now comfortable with this government being my government. I am now happy with this king being my king because I can live a better quality of life under his ruling. You have the freedom to do that. A woman also has the freedom to choose the husband who leads her. We are not forced when a man says you're not getting divorced because I say so. You are forbidden from getting a divorce. I will never give you a divorce. You are stuck in this for life. You are stuck in this for life. That's slavery. A woman has the right to leave a marriage because the man who is leading her is not competent at leading. He is ruining her life with the way he is because she's finding it difficult now to obey him, difficult to be submissive to him. And that's now affecting her deen because now oppressive lines are being crossed. Now she can't sleep with him because she hates him so much. Now she's always rebellious. Now she's always argumentative. Now there's always marital problems. Now the kids are always seeing their parents argue because the wife cannot stand her husband. She thinks he's petty. She thinks he's stupid. She thinks that he's not a good leader at all. Yeah, he might be a provider. No problem. But he's got no emotional intelligence to lead. So if a woman wants to leave a marriage because a man is not leading her properly, she has the full right to. Not every man is competent at being a leader. He doesn't get born with that. He learns it as he grows older. He learns emotional intelligence. He learns how to be a healthy masculine man. Toxic masculinity doesn't come from a man being physically aggressive or verbally aggressive. It comes from a lack of emotional intelligence. If a man is lacking in his emotional intelligence, he can never be a leader, I promise you. And unfortunately, a lot of women, I do blame women for this as well. I've been in this position myself. I include myself in this. We marry men who show us from the beginning, before we marry them, that they're petty. We do this. During the engagement period, he'll create problems over really petty things. Really stupid, minor petty things. He'll be jealous over really stupid things. He will have a problem with really stupid things. And it will irritate you. But because you're so infatuated with the guy, you brush these things under the carpet. If you marry a man who is already petty in things that he has issues with before marriage, I promise you will never be able to be as submissive or obedient to that man. You've already chosen the wrong man to lead you. Because especially when women don't have much experience, especially if it's their first marriage, they don't know how to choose a man who has a high level of emotional intelligence. Because usually that woman would be, traumatized by her past and everything. So if she comes from a family of misogynistic Muslim men, then more often than not, she'll end up marrying the same kind of guy. So she just falls into the same problem again, but in a different dynamic. So when you choose someone who is already petty, he's got no logic in the things that he has issues with from the beginning, you're going to have obedience problems with this guy later. So going back to this hadith about the prostration, the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ said, "The best of you men are those who are best to their families, and I'm the best of men to my family. I'm the best of men to my wives. So take me as a role model. Study my life, study my marriages, and you'll understand how to be amongst the best of men." The Prophet Muhammad ﷺ said this to emphasize and explain the hadith about the prostration. It's a hadith that is connected to those types of men only. Because out of love and admiration and awe and respect, a woman would naturally adore the dust that her husband walks on. It's just a logical hadith to explain. But men use it to abuse and abuse. Because their understanding of the hadith is, no matter what kind of husband I am, zero emotional intelligence, zero leadership skills, as long as I'm a provider, the woman has to shut up. Shut up and accept any rubbish that comes from my way. Any rubbish. she's got to accept it because I'm a provider. And he will use that excuse all the time. I'm the provider. I do this for you and I do that for you. Completely neglecting her emotional needs though. And then he'll say that she's ungrateful. You're ungrateful for everything that I do for you. Not understanding that women need a lot more than financial provision. They will go and complain to their friends and go and complain to sheikhs and imams. You know, my wife is horrible. My wife is argumentative. My wife is so disobedient. But missing out a big chunk of information that I don't nurture my wife emotionally. Yes, I give her financial provision, but I have no I am so emotionally unavailable. I am so scarred from my past. I have serious mummy issues. I am a serial narcissist. And I can't actually show my wife any love and mercy and compassion. I treat her like a slave. Oh, I promise you, he's missing that massive chunk of information out. You think he's going to go and tell his friends how petty he's been at home, how he had to beat his wife black and blue for something really petty, how he stopped his wife from going to see her father just because she upset him with something that day or she didn't make him breakfast that day. You think he's going to tell his friends all of those things? No, he's not. What he's going to tell his friends is, my wife is so argumentative. My wife is so difficult. She's always arguing with me. They don't tell their friends and imams and scholars and whoever it is that they go to complain to all the petty things that they have done to make their wives hate them. Guys, you do not gain anything from being like this, because when a woman starts to hate you and resent you for everything that you put her through, what do you gain out of it? Yeah, you gain your power and authority and, you can feel like a big macho man, but you've got a wife who hates you. You've got a wife who never prays for you, by the way. I'm telling you, I was fluctuating between two different du'as when I was married. Number one, I prayed that he'd get hit by a bus or something because of how much I hated him. And two, I used to pray to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Ya Rabbi, get me out of this situation in the easiest and quickest way possible. You think I even had time to remember him in any good? You think I had any time to remember that? No, I didn't. Because all I was focusing on was, Ya Rabbi, get me out of here. Get me out of here. I was stuck in my situation because I was living in Saudi at the time and I wasn't able to do anything without his permission. And, you're stuck in that situation as a woman. You feel oppressed. You feel like you are dealing with someone so petty, it is killing you. The only thing you can do is pray to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to either get rid of the guy or help you get out of the situation. I'm telling you. There's a reason why so many people, get so many diseases and illnesses from living with men like this. Because it is so difficult to maintain sanity when you're being led by someone who you believe is just plain stupid. Plain stupid. They've got no compassion, no empathy, no understanding. Now, dealing with a narcissistic Muslim woman is different. Okay, that is also very frustrating. I can completely understand how that is so difficult for men, being in that situation. But men, it's easier for you. It's easier for you to have that divorce. Okay, you can issue a talaq and she's gone. She's gone. You're done with her. You don't have to deal with her anymore. Yeah, you might have children, but is it best to, keep this woman in your life who's always ungrateful for everything that you do, always complaining, always moaning, for the sake of children who are witnessing such a toxic marriage? Or is it easier for you to just use your God-given, ability of just issuing a talaq? That's why in Islam, there's no real sympathy or compassion for men who are stuck in toxic marriages, because Allah's already given you the authority to issue a talaq. It will come down to your own weakness if you don't do it, because you're so controlled by the narcissist woman. However, women are different because women are easily oppressed by men who will not issue a divorce. And in the Quran, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives an example of a woman who came to complain to the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam about her husband. Because here it's taken more seriously, as women do not have they do not have the ability to just issue a talaq. they have to get a khula approved by the husband, and there's an exchange sometimes of the mahar and everything. But it just goes to show you that when a woman makes a dua against an oppressive husband, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala takes it seriously. Surah Al-Mujadala, ayah number 1. قد سمع الله قول التي تجادلك في زوجها وتشتكي إلى الله والله يسمع تحاوركما إن الله سميع بصير. Certainly Allah has heard the speech of the one who argues with you, Ya Rasulullah, concerning her husband and directs her complaint to Allah. And Allah hears your conversation. Indeed, Allah is all-seeing and all-knowing. So this happened at a time when a Sahabiya called Khawla bint Tha'laba came to the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, and she complained about her husband to the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ because she felt oppressed by his bad treatment of her. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wanted women to know, I hear your dua, I hear your complaints about your husbands, and I will deal with them. I will deal with these men. Look, a big problem that a lot of women are facing with their husbands is that the husbands do not have any higher authority to kind of, I wouldn't say be scared of, but to respect. Because you'll even see now that a lot of Muslim men won't even respect the fathers of their wives anymore. They'll still, there'll still be domestic violence, there'll still be verbal abuse, spiritual abuse, and he's got no consideration for her family, no consideration for the father who raised her, all right? And this comes from a very high dose of narcissism in a man, because if you have no empathy and compassion for your own brothers in Islam, including her father and her brothers and whoever else she may be related to, then you're not going to care how you treat someone's, sister or daughter or niece. You're not going to care because you're such a narcissist to the degree where your entire life is ruled by your qareen. Your ego, your qareen, and a very low level of nafs. During the reign of Umar ibn al-Khattab, there were many women who were single, women who were widowed, women who had orphans because of the war. And Umar ibn al-Khattab had noticed that men were taking advantage of vulnerable women in the society. So if a woman didn't have, a vicious pack of male relatives to protect her, he noticed that there were women in society who were targeted by the wolves, the narcissistic wolves. So he publicly declared that he will be the wali of every single woman who did not have any male protection. So anyone who wanted to ask for the hand of any of these women would go to Umar ibn Khattab. Anyone who had wronged any of these women was summoned by Umar ibn Khattab. So men were terrified, absolutely terrified of Umar ibn Khattab and being summoned by him. If anyone got summoned by Umar, they would wet themselves because they found him to be extremely terrifying of a person to deal with, not because he was a tyrannical person, but because he implemented justice in the way it's meant to. And they didn't want to be shamed by him. So all the men of that time didn't want to be shamed by Umar radiallahu anhu. So because men had a higher authority to respect, even if they didn't fear Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, they feared Umar. Because remember, there were lots of hypocrites in the society and they weren't true believers. So sometimes for them, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala was out of the equation. But Umar being there as the Khalifa made them treat women well. So unfortunately, we have this problem right now where a lot of men are not holding themselves accountable to any higher authority. And no higher authority is holding men accountable. Yes, they can listen to as many lectures as they want, but if you look into the life of someone who is narcissistic, you will always find that they don't have anyone to answer to. No one can control them. Their parents have no authority over them. No sheikh or an imam has any authority over them. They might pretend, that they respect a certain scholar or an imam, but in reality, they don't respect anybody. There is no higher authority who they would take into account and consideration before mistreating somebody, mistreating someone's daughter. And I can promise you one thing. I promise you this. If anyone was to preach Islam in a way that teaches women, so if you were to embrace Islam and marry Muslim men, you would have to obey every single command that he makes of you just because he pays the rent, pays the bills, puts food and water on the table, whatever it is. And in return, you owe him blind obedience. You have to ask him for permission every 5 minutes for things you want to do. You have to accept all of his petty arguments. You've got to accept everything he says no to with no explanation whatsoever. And you have to accept that he is always going to be the most important person in the marriage, and he doesn't need to consult you about anything whatsoever because he's got a God-given right of doing whatever it is that he wants in the marriage, and you just have to listen and obey and say, yes, sir. I promise you, women will not convert to Islam. Women would not convert to Islam, and this is a massive evidence that shows you that this is the wrong understanding of Islam, because if it puts people off from embracing Islam and it doesn't sound peaceful or encouraging or even desirable, then that's not da'wah. What are you inviting people to? A life of oppression? A life of absolute misery? What woman would accept that? If a man was really serious, really, really serious and honest in his proposal to a woman, and he told her all of this, that this is what you're going to get out of a marriage, even though he's paying the rent and bills for himself as well, it's not just her he's doing it for. He's living in that house too. He's making such a big hoo-ha and a big deal out of it when he's also living in that house. Tell me what woman's going to convert to Islam and be in a hurry to marry a Muslim man. I can't think of any, and I wouldn't believe for a second that women would rush to accept that deal. Many women also complain about the fact that a Muslim husband is constantly reminding them that they need to be grateful for having the basic minimum be provided for them of food, drink, shelter, and basic clothing. So when a woman is constantly reminded that she needs to be grateful for the basic minimum, now I'm not saying that this is something to be belittled, because if a man does shoulder the financial responsibilities of a woman, then that is something to be appreciated for sure, because he's going out there and he's, doing his utmost best to make sure that she's living a comfortable life and everything, and it's something, women need to be grateful for. But when a man reminds her every 5 minutes that she needs to be grateful for the absolute basic minimum that he's doing for her, things that she can do for herself if she wanted to, or maybe she did do everything for herself before she married him, it just causes resentment to grow in her heart, because every time he says that to her, it just makes her feel like she's a woman that he just took off the street, a homeless woman who had nothing going on in her life before him and has no hope in ever actually having a better life after him. So women tend to feel like they're charity cases, or women off the street, when a man constantly has to make her grateful or make her constantly show gratefulness and gratitude for him offering the basic minimum of what requires him to be a husband. It's as if he's achieved something so great, or he's gone out of his way to give her an amazing life, which isn't the case. In most cases, men are really just offering the basic minimum, but they are expecting a lifetime slave in return, a lifetime mother in return. I mean, I think a lot of men are truly living in la la land when they express their expectations of what they expect a wife to be, because it's not worth, for a lot of women, the expectations of what men want women to be, what wives to be, is not worth what those women are getting in return. Because if it's just about paying rent and food and bills, then most women these days can do it themselves. Women are no longer in need of men to survive like, women used to back in 7th century Arabia. We live in a completely different time where women can have that independence. So if a man is constantly reminding his woman that I'm doing the basic minimum for you, it doesn't do anything for the woman. It doesn't do anything whatsoever, because It's something she can do for herself. So if a man does not bring emotional intelligence to the marriage and emotional nurturing, a woman will easily walk away from that marriage. She will easily walk away and not even think twice about it. Because if the emotional element is missing, then she's got no need for that man. We live in a completely different time, and a lot of men really struggle to understand and accept that this is the reality of our situation today, that women can turn around and leave them. Because when a woman is receiving the basic minimum that she can do for herself if she wanted to, and she's getting bad treatment, she's getting abused, she is being reminded every 5 minutes that she needs to be grateful for the food and drink on her table and the roof over her head, then what makes a woman stay? Especially a woman who has no children. What would stop her from turning around and saying, you know what, you can have your dowry, I want out of this. Get me out of here. And then, I'm talking about narcissistic men here, they go into a rage and they get angry and they say, no, there's no divorce. I will not permit you to have a divorce. You are with me until life. You will obey me whether you like it or not. I will do everything I want because I'm the man. Every time she asks him for something and he says no, he's like, no, because I'm the man and I can say no. Do you know how irritating that is to hear all the time? Because if men were put in the situation where they had to hear that from their employers all of the time, men would hate their employers. Believe me, I guarantee it. I guarantee. If the men who are abusing their wives in regards to obedience and compliance and everything, if they were to be put in the same shoes as you, as an employee, being treated that way by their employer, they'd hate their life. Because the employer would keep coming to them and saying, be grateful you've got a job. Be grateful for this and be grateful for that. Do you want to keep your job? If you do, you need to do all of these extra things. If you don't like it, go sling your hook. I can find someone else to do it. If a man is talked to like that by his employer, believe me, he will not only take a nosedive deep into depression, he will also have extreme anger within him. He will have extreme anger within him. And a lot of men do go through this, and that's why when they come home to their wives, they unleash all of their anger onto their wives. And because it's the only place where they can feel powerful. It's the only place where they can, flex their authority and their muscles and say, you know what, I'm the man of this house and you obey me whether you like it or not. Because he's facing a load of rubbish at work. A lot of men unload all of those insecurities and that weakness because they have to keep their job. They need to keep their job. And all of that bottled up resentment and hate, they are unleashing it now on you when they get home. So, no, women don't have any obligation to stay if they don't want to stay. And there's nothing that ties a woman to a marriage just because you've married her. If she wants to leave, she can give you your dowry and she can get out of that situation. But a lot of men will make women feel so guilty and feel so bad for them doing the absolute basic minimum in return for unrealistic and ridiculous expectations. The requirements of, the basic minimum rights towards a Muslim wife, they're stipulated for those who are poor and those who are very young. So if they are able to meet the conditions of getting married, let's just say a 19-year-old wants to get married and he has a job or a part-time job and he's able to provide some sort of accommodation and, pay for the upkeep of a wife and everything, then he can. It's the basic minimum that allows him to enter a marriage and he can be the qawwam, all right? He can have that position as the qawwam. So it's not to say that the basic minimum is what is to be maintained in marriage, because as a man, grows in his achievements and his rizq, then he is expected to be generous with his wife and his family. But a lot of red pill men, they make women believe that they are only entitled to the basic minimum all the time, whether it's at the beginning or later on in marriage, because that's all he's entitled to give Islamically. But he wants complete blind obedience in return. Not only is that not a fair deal, but it's completely wrong Islamically. Because like I said, the basic minimum requirements are for those who are unable to afford getting married. They don't have enough money, like other men, to get married. And it's for men who are very young. So if you meet these very basic requirements, then you are qualified now to have a wife. So, and I'm saying this because I also see a lot of people who complain about their husbands being really stingy. Very, very, very stingy. Stinginess is one of the biggest problems that women face these days. The stinginess of men can cause, again, women to hate and resent their husbands. Why would they obey? How can you expect any woman to be submissive and have feminine nature and obey you if you're so stingy as hell with your money? You're not even generous with her. Why on earth should she, be that wife that you've always wanted? It's not going to happen. You are living in la la land if you actually genuinely believe that that's achievable, that that's possible. Living with a stingy man is one of the worst things a woman can experience. And if you're going to justify Islam, Islamic texts to make this work in your favour by saying that, a wife is only entitled to these very basic things, then why are you expecting a wife to turn into your mother and be a mother herself and be an amazing wife to you and be a maid and a cook and a cleaner and everything else? How is that a good deal for her? It's not a good deal at all. I think a lot of women would rather choose to be single than ever get caught up in something like this. And remember, even if a woman's been single, if a lot of women are choosing not to get married, it's because they're hearing all of these stories from their sisters, their friends, and people that they come across. They're hearing all of these stories and they decide not to get married because it's not worth it. It's not worth putting myself through all of this abuse when I can just provide the basic minimum for myself. What is a man offering aside from financial provision that would make me happy with him? In most cases, it's nothing. Absolutely nothing. So, a lot of people say, these women are feminists if they want to stay, they want to stay single, they don't want to be married. So what? So what if women don't want to get married because they are fearful of how they're going to be treated by misogynistic Muslim men? It's going to be so much better for them to stay single. And there is no obligation in Islam for anyone to get married. There is no obligation unless there is a fear of you falling into zina. That's it. If you have no fear of falling into zina, then marriage becomes a sunnah. Not an obligation, it becomes a sunnah if you can and if you feel safe enough to. So men are not motivating women to get married. There are too many stories going around now, too many cases in courts that scare women and put women off getting married. And now the men are getting frustrated because they can't find good women to marry. The good women are terrified of marrying red pill misogynistic men. They're terrified. They won't even go near red pill misogynistic men. They won't go near man children. They're not going to go near anyone like that, especially if they're healed women. So now we have an epidemic of women who are not getting married. A growing number of women just choose not to get married. And it's causing a problem for the men. And men are becoming bitter and resentful about it. But they don't understand that what they need to fix is their understanding of Islam and understanding of marriage. And until that's fixed, nothing's going to get fixed. Nothing's going to get fixed. If you think you can just be tyrannical at home because you're entitled to be that way, you're entitled to blind obedience, you are living in cuckoo land. Because the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ himself was not like that. Al-Khulafa al-Rashidin were not like that. Who are you to play master to those who you are responsible for? How on earth do you think that this is going to, how on earth do you think this is going to work? But what would have happened here is that you would have learnt that from your father. You would have learnt that from your parents growing up. That's why I said, please refer back to my previous podcast, because it will teach you why and how you've become this kind of person, why you've attracted these men, and why you've become this kind of man. It's because in your family, more often than not, your father would have been the same with your mother, and it would have worked. You would have seen that it worked. So instead of educating yourself and gaining more knowledge about how to become a better person, how to have a healthy marriage, how to be an amazing husband, you just take the easy route and follow exactly what it is your father did. It's just food for thought, because I'm hearing a lot of men complaining about women who just don't want to get married anymore. And there'll be young women too in their 20s, 30s, 40s. Women who just prefer to be alone. And there's a reason for that. Because women don't want to risk ending up in a marriage with a man who makes their life an absolute misery because he thinks he's the Sultan of Brunei or something. It's not going to happen. People are waking up now. People are waking up to the correct understanding of Islam, and they're waking up to all the brainwashing that they've been through when they were growing up. They're waking up to it now. And if this is something that can't be fixed soon, it's going to drag. It's going to drag on for a very long time. And what's going to happen is men are not going to get married. Women aren't going to get married. Everyone's going to end up falling into zina. And we're going to have an even corrupt society more than we do now. That's what's going to happen. So it's something really important that we need to address, because I'm telling you, imams, scholars are not addressing this properly. They're not addressing this properly. And if the majority of scholars right now are misogynistic, then they're definitely not going to address the problem with a man's tyrannical idea of al-qawam, of being al-qawam. Because they do it themselves. They do it themselves in their own homes. That's why a lot of scholars avoid it, because that's who they are themselves. So it's just something to think about. So a lot of women really struggle because of the hate they have towards the husband, because of the disrespect, because they don't admire this man, because they regret marrying this man, because they want to get out of the marriage. Men find it frustrating and cannot understand why a woman wouldn't want to be submissive and obedient. Of course, a woman's going to be rebellious in that, in that situation. Of course she's going to be rebellious. What else do you expect? She doesn't want to, feel enslaved by somebody. Look, Imam Ali radiallahu anhu said, "Do not be a slave to others when Allah has created you free." Do not be a slave to Allah. Allah created you free. Men are enslaving their wives in marriages that they don't want to be in. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, either hold them in kindness or release them in a civil manner. That's it. Hold them in kindness. You either keep them and treat them well like a Muslim husband should, or release them in a civil manner. Release them in a civil manner means don't threaten to take their children away. Don't threaten them with unleashing all hell on them in court. Don't ruin their reputation with a smear campaign and false accusations and lies behind their back to ruin their reputation. Don't turn people against them. If someone does this to you, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, I promise, will compensate you. Because in Surah Al-Baqarah, ayah 231, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَإِذَا طَلَقْتُمُ النِّسَاءَ فَبَلَغْنَ أَجْلَهُنَّ فَامْسِكُوهُنَّ بِمَعْرُوفٍ أَوْ سَرِّحُوهُنَّ بِمَعْرُوفٍ وَلَا تُمْسِكُوهُنَّ ضِرَارًا لِتَعْتَدُوا وَمَنْ يَفْعَلْ ذَلِكَ فَقَدْ ظَلَمَ نَفْسَهُ. Alright? So here Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying that even if you issue a talaq to a woman, you have to keep her bima'roof, in kindness, with love and mercy and kindness. Or, if you're unable to do this, if you are verbally abusive, spiritually abusive, physically abusive, you can't help yourself but be abusive, then you have to let her go in kindness. Let her go in kindness. Do not harm her even when you let her go. Because if you hold her against her will in a marriage and you harm her by abusing her as revenge or whatever, then وَمَنْ يَفْعَلْ ذَلِكَ فَقَدْ ظَلَمَ نَفْسَهُ. Whoever does that has caused oppression against himself, because you'll be held accountable for that on the Day of Judgment, and she will hold you accountable for that on the Day of Judgment. So a lot of men think that if a woman is being rebellious and obedient, because I've spent all this on a marriage, and I've spent all this on a dowry, and I've spent all this on a marriage in general, right? Spending on the rent and bills, that, a woman's not getting away that easily. She will obey me. I will do whatever it takes and she will obey me. It doesn't work like that. It doesn't work like that. If you choose to invest in a wedding and a marriage and dowry and whatever, that's out of your own choice. That is out of your own choice. It's not because she owes you now blind obedience if she's not getting the respect and the love and the care and the mercy that she's supposed to be getting from you as a husband. It doesn't matter if you give her the life of a princess. A woman cannot obey anybody who does not nurture her emotionally, period. And a lot of narcissistic men cannot do that. This is the one thing, the one area in life that they are not competent in. Emotional intelligence and emotional nurturing, they don't have it. Because narcissists self-loathe, they self-hate. They can never give that kind of emotional love. They don't like affection. It just makes them feel so uncomfortable to even have healthy intimacy with anybody. That's why a lot of narcissists cheat in marriage, because the wife's needs for an emotional connection and intimacy makes him feel sick. He just wants an object to use and abuse. He doesn't want to be told that I'm not enjoying intimacy, and he hears those complaints because she doesn't feel loved. He just wants the whole thing over and done with to fulfill his needs, and she should be happy and acceptant of that. So when a woman keeps complaining about the lack of emotional nurturing and the lack of emotional intimacy in the marriage, he will seek to fulfill his needs, especially sexual needs, elsewhere. Because other women who are accepting of a quick hookup, they are more suitable for narcissists. There's no emotional requirement here. But there is with the wife. I get clients, wallahi al-azim, I get clients coming to me and the women are telling me, we haven't been intimate for over 6 months. He doesn't want to. Because she requires for him to be emotionally connected to her during intimacy, and he can't do it. He doesn't like it, doesn't enjoy it. And because of that, he's got sexual problems. He's unable to actually perform sexually because he's so turned off by the fact he's got to be emotionally connected to her. He can't do it. It just turns him off to see her so unhappy because he's unable to fulfill that role for her emotionally. He's void of emotions because he's narcissist. He's a narcissist. And then men complain, my wife is disobedient. My wife doesn't love me. My wife, she's a feminist. Because she's now even more adamant on working. She's even more adamant on, having a career. It's because she's now in a marriage in which she doesn't feel safe. She doesn't feel safe with you anymore. She feels like she needs some financial backup. I'm telling you, I see men all the time. They make their wives beg for the 10 and 20 pounds, guys. And men love that. They love that. Like, oh, you need 10, 20 pounds? What's it for? What's it for? Oh, no, you don't need that. You don't need that. I'm not going to give that to you. You don't need that. And then they wonder why women really push to have a career, really push for that financial independence. They wonder. There is no wonder. It's logical. But a lot of these men, they live in la la land where they think that they can be like that and still get blind obedience from the women. A lot of women get into a marriage and realise, I can't actually obey this man. I can't actually be submissive to this man. Now, when I say obey here, by the way, there are certain circumstances in which a woman does have to obey her husband, okay? I'll give you an example. Let's say you're living in a community where there's a lot of Islamophobia going on. Maybe drive-by shootings. It's not a safe area to be in. And a man's got a wife and kids, and now he's worried about their safety. The kids, they walk to school. Maybe his kids wear hijab. He's worried about them getting abused because of the growing Islamophobia in his community. So if he was to say to his wife, we have to move, we are moving actually, because we can no longer stay in this community, it's dangerous, and I'm worried about you and the children. Here, a wife needs to be obedient to her husband because he's responsible for his family. He's responsible for the safety of the family as the protector. She can't argue with him here because he's right. He's giving a very logical explanation as to why they need to leave. So here, there are certain circumstances in which, quick obedience is requested. because he is now responsible for the safety of his family. However, there would be another man who would say, we need to pack and leave, we're moving to another city, but for different reasons. This time the reasons would be, he's very insecure about the close relationship that she has with her family and friends who live nearby. He doesn't like it because he sees that they're a great support system for her. Now, he's an abuser, right? And he knows that if he was to continue in his ways, her family would be like, you know what? She's coming back to us. She's coming back to us. She's got the support, all the support that she needs. She's going to stay with us. So because her being in a very supportive environment is a threat to him, he needs to move her out of it. It's a happy environment. It's a safe environment. There is no need whatsoever to move out of it. But there will be narcissistic men who, for the wrong intentions, will ask their wives to obey them so that they can get their way in something that is detrimental to the well-being of the wife. So he might say, oh, I got a job in Saudi. I got a job in Dubai. We're moving there. She doesn't want to move. She's happy where she is. She's got a father, a mother near her. She's got her sisters near her. She's got her friends near her. She's in a happy environment. Now, a man who truly loves his wife will take that into consideration. But a narcissistic man will see that as a threat. So he will quickly apply for a job in another city or another country and ship everyone there. Because narcissists need to isolate you from a support system. So here, a wife might rebel and she'll say, I don't want to go. I don't want to go. To him, she's being argumentative and disobedient because she genuinely doesn't want to go. He didn't ask, he didn't sit with her and consult her and give her the reasons as to why he believes they should move. He just said, you know what, I got a job, we're leaving. I'm the husband, I make the decisions. And he expects her to have complete blind obedience for that. This is the issue that we're facing in our communities. Men are not telling each other the honest reasons for them doing certain things. They just complain about the reaction of the woman. They complain about the reaction of the woman rather than the actual core problem. When I was married, I remember one incident where I was going to a cousin's wedding. So I'd picked my dress, the makeup that I was going to wear, everything. So anyway, I'm getting ready to go out. And, mind you, this is an all women's wedding, There are no men at this wedding. So I was in Saudi at the time. I put my abaya on, my hijab on, and he looked at my face before we left and he said, why are you wearing that colour lipstick? And I said, because I want to and because it matches my dress. He said, I don't like it. Go take it off. And I said, what has it got anything to do with you? What colour lipstick I wear? He said, I don't like it. I'm like, but it matches my dress. He said, I don't care. Go and wipe it off. I said, so what's the alternative? He said, I will pick out an alternative. This is how petty. This is the kind of pettiness I was dealing with. All right. So he went rummaging through my makeup bag to find a shade of MAC that he approved of. So anyway, he picked out a shade and he was being really petty about it. He was opening every single lipstick and checking every colour. And I'm just sitting there watching him, praying he gets hit by a bus. I'm telling you, right? So he's going through my entire makeup collection until he finds a lipstick shade that he's comfortable with. I said to him, I don't understand why this is being made a problem right now. I am going to an all-women wedding. What does it matter, the makeup that I have on my face? He was like, Astaghfirullah al-Azim, woman, why can't you just obey me? Why can't you just obey me and accept that I'm the man and I can say whatever I want and I can tell you to do whatever I want. If I want you to wear green, you're going to wear green. If I tell you to wear red, you're going to wear red. This is how petty a lot of Muslim men are, but they would never tell their friends this, all right? So anyway, he picks out a lipstick shade for me that didn't go with my dress at all. You could hardly see it. I mean, honestly, it was such a light shade of pink. There was no point wearing makeup anyway with that shade. And then he takes a closer look at my face and he says, you know what, you've got too much mascara on as well. And he gives me a makeup wipe and he said, wipe some of it off. I don't like it. It's a bit too much. And I'm just staring at him in complete disbelief. I was in a feeling of disbelief and also rage at the same time because of how much I hated him. I have never hated anyone as much as I hated my ex-husband, I tell you that. And so we ended up having an argument over this because it turned from it being an issue with lipstick with the colour of lipstick to him believing that he married the ex-wife of Satan, all right, from the way he was screaming and shouting. And he just wanted to ruin my mood. He saw me so happy, going to this wedding, and he just wanted to ruin my happiness. Every time he saw me in a happy mood, he had to create a problem, petty problem, and ruin it, all right? So anyway, we had an argument, and then during the argument, he said, you know what, I've changed my mind. You're not going to the wedding. You're not going. And I'm telling you, it took every drop of iman that I had to not kill him there and then. I'm telling you, because narcissists will push you to that. They will push you to such dark thoughts in moments like that no one could ever believe. No one could ever believe. I have a very close friend of mine whose husband does not allow her to eat what she wants to eat. Even when they go to restaurants, he will order her food for her because he is the man of the house and she will do as he says. So he counts her calories because he doesn't want her to get fat. He does not allow her to order what she wants to eat. And he doesn't allow her to have her favourite snacks at home. And he told her, if you were to ever eat things that I disapprove of, you will see what will happen to you. Because I don't want no fat wife. And she's not fat at all. Nowhere near fat. This is the kind of pettiness women are dealing with, guys. And women get punished a lot for being disobedient when the man is being really petty. So I was banned from going to this wedding. I couldn't go because he was the only one who could take me at the time. There was no way in hell I could have taken an Uber or anything. Women didn't drive in Saudi in those days. So there was nothing I could do about it but hate him 10 times more, And then, there would be so many other times when, we'd have arguments over petty things and he would punish me by taking away my laptop for 3 days and locking it in a room. I was working on my PhD thesis at the time. I'm telling you, wallahi al-azim, until now, I don't even know how I finished that thesis. It's a miracle of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that I finished my PhD thesis, it being in that environment. Because he would take my laptop and lock it away as a punishment for me not doing something or me arguing against something. And even when I said to him, if everything that you're saying is true and it's your right to be this way, let's discuss this with your dad. I'd love to sit with your dad and get his intake on it. He'd go into a massive rage. How dare you? How dare you even say, we should get a mediator? How dare you affect my masculinity and get my father involved? Or he would go into a complete rage where I would see his qareen come out because I dared to challenge his authority. There was no authority. I was dealing with a 5-year-old little boy. I had no respect because men can push you to that. I'm telling you these stories because I need men to understand that when we're in that state of mind, you cannot expect obedience and any kind of feminine submission from a woman. A woman will only be obedient and submissive to you when you are a protector, provider, and a leader with emotional intelligence. Because when you have emotional intelligence, you are so loving, you are so caring, you are so sweet, you are so considerate. You don't mind a woman asking you questions. You don't mind a woman not doing all your household chores. You are someone who goes out of his way to help her with the housework. You go out of her way to get her someone to help her with the housework. You go out of your way to help her with the children. You do things to make life easier for her. What woman is not going to adore you? And if a woman does not adore you, I promise you, brother, you are with a narcissistic woman. A lot of men complain. They say, well, I do all of that. I take care of the kids. I'm the one getting up for night feeds. I'm the one cleaning the house. I'm the one hoovering. I'm the one providing. and she's still not happy. She's still ungrateful. Fun fact, you're with a narcissistic woman. That's the only explanation for it. Because I promise you, if you were with the right woman and you did that for her, I promise you she would kiss your hands and your forehead every time she sees you. You're with the wrong woman. Not all women are disobedient because they want to be. Not all women are disobedient because they're feminist. Not all women are disobedient because they want control and power over their men. They are disobedient and rebellious and problematic because they are being abused physically, emotionally, spiritually. There is abuse going on. And arguments over petty things can really knock every drop of love out of that woman for that man. So do you think my ex-husband went around telling his friends that he rummaged through my makeup bag and opened every single cap of MAC lipstick to find a shade that he approved of? You think he's going to tell his friends that? No, he's not. So if you've got friends who are always complaining about their wives being disobedient and rebellious and feminist, think again. Think again before you advise them to get a second wife, bruv. Threaten her with a second wife, bruv. Or you're like, move away from her family, bruv. It's her family. They're feeding all this into her brain, bruv. Keep her away from her feminist friends, bruv. When you advise men this way, you are causing more damage to what's already happening to the woman in that situation. You are causing that marriage to be even more toxic than it already is. Because now when he comes home threatening her to have a second wife if she doesn't fix up, guess what's going to happen? Even more toxic problems, even more arguments. Some women, wallahi, they get to the point of suicide because of this. There are some women who feel so enslaved by a situation with their husbands that they become suicidal because they don't know how to get out of that situation. They hate it. They absolutely hate it. One of the core reasons why we have this problem today comes as a result of how women were raised, how many Muslim women were raised. I remember in the 90s growing up, my aunties used to compete with each other as to how well their daughters could cook and clean and do all of these household chores and, fold clothes and be really good at organizing and tidying. And that was how much of our upbringing was, because our value was seen in how much of a great housewife we could be. Now, this is in Saudi, where a lot of women they have maids or get maids. However, because back then there weren't really many opportunities for women, it's not like today, where Mohammed bin Salman has opened the floor, for many opportunities for women in careers and traveling and education. It wasn't like that back then. So back then, you could only travel with your husband. You could only work if you absolutely had to. Like if you were struggling to survive and you needed to help your husband work, then you'd go out to work. But back then, it was seen as an embarrassing thing for a woman to work in Saudi society, because it meant that her husband wasn't able to provide for her and her father wasn't able to provide for her. So if a woman was seen going to a company to work with other men or work in a store or work somewhere, it was seen as something to be ashamed of, because it basically indicated that the men in her family weren't able to look after her financially. And so the only thing that mothers could actually do to make use of their time was to teach their daughters how to cook and clean, because, that was the only thing that would give them value. Back then, a woman's career didn't give her value and a woman's higher education did not give her value. So if she at least had the great skills of, cooking great meals, maybe sewing clothes, sometimes these women had their own businesses working from home, all of that was fine, but it was always geared towards the home because of the fact the men could not be shamed. The men could not be shamed for not being providers. So if you go to the poorer areas of Saudi, I'm talking back in the 80s and 90s now, you will always find that it's the poor women who used to go out and work. because their husbands weren't able to completely, provide for them and their many children. So it was seen as actually a low-class thing back then to be working in companies with other men. Now, because of the feminist movement, women are CEOs, women are top managers, women are running the show. In Saudi, it's completely flipped. And the idea of a Saudi woman now being a housewife is absurd. Absolutely absurd. If you go and ask a Saudi woman to be a housewife now, she'll laugh in your face, because the times have completely changed, and a woman's value is no longer placed in her ability to cook and clean and be a good housewife. There are nannies and maids to do those jobs now, and there are nannies who are completely taking care of people's children, because women now want to focus on their career and their independence. So the majority of women who were raised to be great housewives were often codependent, empathic women and codependent women. Now, narcissistic women were also somewhat raised in the same way, but fathers knew that narcissistic women are not the types to serve. You will not get a narcissistic woman who has it in her nature to serve a man. So she's not going to go out of her way to make sure that her children are eating the healthiest meals, that her husband's looked after, his clothes are nice, his clothes are washed and they're ironed and everything. Oh, narcissistic women don't do things like that. So she is the one who will always demand the maid, or she will be the one who will always neglect her home. Her home is always a mess. Her kids are always eating unhealthy, those frozen foods that you just chuck in the oven. She has no patience and no desire to cook and do anything like that. They are princesses in their homes, okay? They do not want to serve anyone. They are the ones who are put on a pedestal, and they are served during their entire marriage. Now, in order for a narcissistic woman to win over a good man, she has to pretend that she is that type of woman who is a housewife, and she's, she is someone who will look after him and her children. So he buys into that future faking. It's a manipulation called future faking. He might get it for the first few weeks, for the first few months, and then it will completely disappear. Because it's not in her nature to do that. She's got her foot in the door, and she has now manipulated him into believing that she's this incredible wife that he fantasized her to be. Now, you also get a lot of men who don't want housewives. They find it degrading and humiliating for their own wife to be a housewife and to cook and clean and do all of these things. Everyone's different. I've come across people in my life, and the men, if you tell them that, you've got great housewife skills and everything, they're like, what? I don't want that. That's a maid's job. I don't want a maid. I want a wife. I want this. So when you're growing up, when you feel and you believe that your self-worth is attached to that because of how your parents have raised you. Your parents have raised you to believe that if you're good, if you excel in these skills, you will be a high-value wife. And then you come across people in life who tell you, no, I don't want that. Like men who say, I do not want a maid as a wife. I will get you a nanny. I will get you a cleaner. I want this. I want a woman to be there for me at home. I want a woman to always take care of herself and dress nicely and take care of the kids. I don't care if you cook and clean. I don't want any of that. So there are men like that too, who do not see a woman's value in being a good housewife. And then you get the codependent woman. Now, the codependent woman who has been programmed to only see her value in being a good housewife and only see her value as being a wife. And that's why so many women panic when they're not married by their mid-20s or late 20s. Because if they now hit their 30s and they're not married, it's a disaster. Depression befalls upon them because they're like, well, my entire existence has gone down the toilet because I've been raised to believe that my value lies in not only being married, but being a housewife and serving my husband and children as well. Only. There is no other purpose to their life. There are no other ambitions that they, would have or be raised to have. They're just happy, being a mom, being a housewife. And there's nothing wrong with that. If that's all a woman wants, there's nothing wrong with that. I know women, like some of us see cleaning and cooking as a therapy, as an art. There are lots of women who enjoy doing the housework. There are lots of women who enjoy cooking. I'm not saying there's a problem with it at all, but not every woman is built that way. And men, a lot of these men want to put women in the same category, that they all have to be raised like robots the same, to serve men and their children. Not all women are like that. Even the Sahabiyat, so many women were not like that. Not all women are maternal. Not all women know how to look after their husbands, and it's not because they weren't raised properly. It's just not in them. There were women who used to join the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ and the Sahaba on the battlefield because they had more masculine traits and they were placed better elsewhere. There were women who were placed in markets because they had excellent manager skills. They didn't want to be mums. There was Sahabiyat like that. But I feel like today, a lot of red pill Muslim men are forcing women into a box. So she could be a CEO, a manager, she could be a business owner, she could be anyone. But now that you're married to me, you're going to be this housewife. You are forced into this role of obedience and submission because I'm the man. Because I've told you to. But it's not in her nature to be like that. You've chosen a woman who clearly has more alpha blood than you have. How can you force that woman into submission and obedience just because you believe that she's a trophy wife? She's a trophy wife for you now. A lot of men find a lot of pleasure in bringing a woman down. So if she is a CEO, for example, and maybe she manages a lot of men in her company, to bring that woman down from being a CEO to a regular housewife who does nothing at home but cook and clean and, do all of these things, it's like men enjoy seeing that downfall of a woman. And again, I'm not saying that there's anything wrong with a woman being a housewife and taking care of her children. That is a woman's primary role. That is. If a woman can balance the two, or at least prioritize being a wife and a mother, especially when she has children, she'll get more reward from that from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with it. Like I said, a lot of women really enjoy that. But what happens to the codependent woman in this situation is that she gets used to, again, her value being placed in her being a housewife. She gets married to one of these misogynistic Muslim men, these man children or these red pillars, whatever, red pill poppers. And she is now trying to impress the guy with her household skills, right? She's now impressing him with all the meals that she can cook and the cleaning and her organisation skills and her gardening skills and everything. She's trying to impress him with all of that out of hope that she's going to get the validation. Now, in the beginning with a narcissistic man, she will get the validation because he wants to encourage her to keep going. And then later on, he flips it and makes her feel like, well, you've done nothing for me. This is your job. You owe me. You owe me all of this. You're not doing anything for me. Knowing full well that there are so many other women out there who wouldn't even think about doing anything like that for a man. But he's got to make her believe that, well, this is your job anyway. What you're doing is not special. It's not amazing. You cooking and cleaning and doing the gardening and doing all of these chores. Getting up in the morning to make my breakfast. Getting up in the night, to make me something if I'm hungry, if I'm ill, you make me medicines and this and that. Oh, you're just doing your job. You're just doing your job. So the codependent woman here, the wife, she gets programmed into believing that, well, okay, I have to work harder and impress him in other ways. So the codependent wife always ends up in burnout. She goes through burnout because now she's got to find other ways of impressing him. She's already doing an amazing job, but he's making her feel like, what you're doing is just normal. You owe me this anyway. I'm your husband. You owe me this. I'm the one outside, providing. I'm bringing food to the table and everything. This is the least you can do. So she has to go out of her way to find other ways to impress him. And now he's nitpicking on her weight. Now he's nitpicking on her friends. Now he's nitpicking on her going out with her family. So what's going to happen with the codependent wife is that she will tolerate so much pettiness until she reaches the point of depression. And when she reaches the point of depression, either she will feel forced to be submissive and obedient to all of his ridiculous demands, because now he's thinking, well, I can actually say anything to this woman and she'll accept. because he sees a fear in her being divorced, because again, she's attached her self-worth to being married, to having, a family and children and everything. So he sees a fear in her being divorced. He sees a fear in her going back to a horrible family or a horrible father. So he increases the pettiness. I'm telling you, I've had my ex-husband tell me not to wear blue nail varnish when I wanted to wear green. We had arguments over things like that. And when I'd say to him, what is your problem if I want to wear blue nail varnish today? He says, I'm the husband and I tell you what colour to wear. If I don't like blue nail varnish on you, you do not wear blue nail varnish. To that, wallahi, to that degree. We would have a full-blown argument because I would be so frustrated at him even nitpicking on my nail polish colour. He would find such joy in nitpicking on the tiniest, pettiest things because it made him feel powerful. It made him feel, or I have that power and authority to even tell you what colour nail polish to wear. And if you don't, I'm going to give you a bit of hell on earth because I'm going to remind you again and again and again how a woman is nothing and that a man is to be obeyed. Because the Prophet Muhammad told you to obey us. Because the Prophet Muhammad told you to do this and told you to do that. I'm sorry he did not tell women to obey petty men. But if the Prophet Muhammad was living today, he'd be horrified at the men today. Horrified at these petty, narcissistic men. I can guarantee you he would not tell women that they were obligated to obey these men. Because these men push women into depression. They push these women into low states of iman because, again, they're being manipulated by the deen. Do you know how many women I've come across who have told me, what kind of prophet is this to be telling men that women need to obey them for everything? And I say, astaghfirullah, don't say that. It wasn't meant to be like that. This is how you're affecting people's iman. Because now they're starting to resent the Prophet for it. For these ahadith. Ta'at az-zawj fima amar. Ta'at az-zawj fima amar means that the wife is to obey the husband whenever he makes a command. Now, a lot of men take this out of context. Because, again, usually when a man makes a command and he needs obedience, it's always in relation to the safety of his family. It's in relation to the safety of his family and not for every tiny stupid little thing like this. The codependent woman is the one who will tolerate and tolerate and tolerate all of this pettiness until her health deteriorates. She may either lose weight or gain weight. She will, go through all stages of depression until she gets to a point where she starts to rebel. Okay? There will come a point where she will start to rebel. She will either die a very long, slow death in this state, or she will just wake up one day and really have enough of this. So she'll wake up and she'll be like, I'm not taking this anymore. I'm going to do what I want to do. I'm going to do what I want to do. I want to wear green nail polish today. I'm going to wear green. I want to wear this dress today. I'm going to wear that dress. I want to go see my friends today. I'm going to see. And then that's when the problems start happening because she starts to rebel now. Men take this part of the marriage and then tell everyone women are feminists and rebellious and they don't obey. Because they're not actually talking about all the petty things that they've done before that to make this happen. So it's only natural for a woman to want to break out of this slavery, out of this cage. You put an animal in a tiny cage, it's going to want to break out. We're not created to be slaves. So marital problems happen here because the women have had enough. The women get rude. The women become really rebellious. And they start to answer back and they start to become really argumentative. Now here, the women are either divorced or the man refuses to divorce her because in his mind he's like, well, I'm not divorcing you. I will break you. I will make you submit and I will make you obey me. You're not getting a divorce. You're here with me until you die. You're here with me until you die. You think you can rebel against me? You think you can stand up against me? Watch what I'm going to do to you. Physical abuse starts here. And this is why they take the ayah out of context. وَضْرِبُوهُنَّ is, a lot of misogynistic men, they take that as beat your wives to discipline them. This is where domestic abuse happens, because they justify it now, because the wife is so rebellious and nothing is working with her anymore. She's had enough. She's had enough and she's broken out of it. She's had enough. He takes her to a sheikh. He says she's got black magic on her. He takes her to an imam. He takes her to a Sharia court judge. And the judge says, well, you need to obey your husband. You need to obey your husband, sister. Well, he's got a point. Honestly, there is no surprise as to why a lot of victims end up killing their abusers. I'm telling you. Because when they find no support, especially from their families, their fathers are like, oh, no, I don't want my daughter back. I don't want my daughter back. I don't want to bear her responsibility. No, take her back. Discipline her, do whatever you have to do with her. Don't bring her back to me. There's no surprise why a lot of victims end up killing their abusers. I've seen it in court. It can get to that when a woman is forced into submission and obedience with a man she doesn't want to be with. She doesn't want to be there. She hates him so much. This is something that a lot of scholars, imams, are not talking about. It's being brushed under the carpet. Honestly, we've had enough of it. We've absolutely had enough of it. This is a seriously long podcast, but I think it's probably one of the most important yet. Because a lot of men and a lot of shuyukh and a lot of imams do not understand what's going on. Actually, that might be a lie, because they do, because they're like that themselves. Okay, they know very well. They do know very well. But I also see a lot of deluded sheikhs and imams who are living in la la land thinking that every man is being fair with his wife. Another podcast for that, inshallah. So I just wanted to highlight this point because it's really important, how it's the codependent women who end up in the worst toxic marriages with these men, because narcissistic women, they won't do it anyway. Empathic women will leave early on. They're like, I'm not dealing with this. I was not raised to deal with this rubbish. My father wasn't like that. You think I'm going to do this for a man? For this idiot, misogynistic idiot? I don't think so. I'm out of here. That's what an empathic woman would do. But the codependent woman, unfortunately, will stay because her self-worth is attached to being married. And her self-worth is attached to being an obedient and submissive wife. She believes that the more obedient and submissive I am, the more Allah will love me. The more the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ will love me. I will enter Jannah this way. Especially if she gets validated by her abusive husband for being submissive and obedient to all of his petty demands, right? So if she starts to listen, if she does listen to him with his pettiness, he's going to reward her for that. So she continues. And the day she says, this is getting a bit too much for me now, he'll punish her. So again, trauma bond. You get rewarded for being abused. Who can live like that? Who on earth can live like that? But unfortunately, a lot of codependent women do, and that's why they live for like 10, 20, 30 years with the same man in this life. And you wonder why mothers cannot raise their children properly. These are the women who are raising our future generation of men. They're damaged women. Damaged, depressed, toxic women. Now they've become so toxic because of all the hate and resentment that they've built up for their husbands over the years, and they feel like they cannot leave. They feel stuck in the marriage. These are the women who are raising the generation of Muslim men. So we are seriously facing a huge crisis when it comes to the whole submission and obedience subject. No one is willing to come and debate me on this. I have contacted so many people about this to open a dialogue about it. No one's come near me about it. Honestly, I'm open to it. Because what's happening in our societies right now, and the women you are producing to be mothers for your children, you are the cause, all of these men are the cause of new generations of codependent and narcissistic men and women to be raised. Because when you're raised by a depressed mother, what could you gain out of that as a boy or as a girl? What are you going to gain out of that? When you're raised by an abusive father who treats your mother as a maid, what are you going to gain out of that? And you see him be so petty with her, you will either become like him, or your daughters will marry men like him. Food for thought. And this takes me on to another hadith, where the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ said, if a woman observes her 5 daily prayers, fasts her month of Ramadan, guards her chastity and obeys her husband, it will be said to her, enter paradise from whichever of the gates of paradise you wish. It's in Bukhari. So here, I'm not arguing against this hadith because I agree with it, okay? I agree that if you are with the right man, if a woman is with the right man, it's very easy to be submissive to him. I'm telling you, it's very easy because you love him so much. When you love someone so much, you respect them so much. And when you respect them so much, you will trust them with their wisdom, you will trust their logic, and you will trust them to lead. Okay? You know that you're being led by someone you have a lot of respect for, and you know that when he says no to something, he's got a good reason for it. Whether he explains it or not, you trust him, okay? So when a woman is with a man like that, it becomes very easy to be that type of woman. Very easy to, be in that high state of Iman. And when you're in a high state of Iman, you don't have any issues with hadiths like this. You don't have any issues with a man being a leader. But it's an issue for a woman who doesn't love or respect her husband. It's an issue because now she feels forced to do it. And there are some women the ones who become suicidal are the ones who feel forced because they've got nowhere else to go. They feel like they have no choice but to obey this man. They either fear for their life with this man if they don't. They fear domestic violence, or they fear just being homeless if they were to leave. They've got nowhere to go. I'm going to do another podcast about this because a woman having no male relatives and a safe family to go back to, this is the serious crisis we're facing in our societies at the moment. It's a different subject for another day, but I'm going to address it, inshallah. Women who do not have good male relatives. So this hadith is actually beautiful. It's beautiful for women because it's easy, right? You fast Ramadan, you do your daily prayers, you guard your chastity, you're not with other men or anything like that. And you obey a husband who you love and adore. Just for those reasons alone, you can go straight to al-Firdaus. Brilliant. That's a comfort to us women. And that is why it is so important that you choose someone who is easy to be submissive to, easy to obey. Being obedient doesn't mean you're a slave to that person. It doesn't mean that you're weak. It means that when it comes to critical situations, you will entrust your husband to deal with them. You will trust him to deal with them. Like the example I gave you of living in an Islamic phobic community. That is where obedience is needed. Obedience is not needed every 5 minutes. Permission is not needed every 5 minutes to do very simple daily mundane things. However, to inform someone of what you're going to do is respectful. So for example, if you want to go and visit your family, maybe your mother's called you and she said to you, I'd really like to see you today, can you pass by? Instead of just picking up the phone and telling your husband, I'm going to go and see my mom, he might have had plans for you guys. He might be coming home early. He might need you to pick up the kids today from school. He might have something going on, right? So instead of just picking up the phone and saying, this is what I'm going to do, you say, Mom's just called me. She really wants me to pass by today. When's a good time for me to go? And you've already created harmony in that marriage. Women who go around demanding men, to do things, or they go around telling men, I will be doing this. I will be applying for that job. I will be going out with my friends. I will be traveling. You're just, you're bringing problems on yourself, especially if the man's good. I'm talking about good men here. The good man that the Prophet Muhammad referred to in his hadith about the prostration. It's not for all men, because you could be married to a drug dealer. You could be married to a crack addict. You could be married to a womanizer. You could be married to a criminal. Are you telling me that hadith refers to the obedience of those types of men? I don't think so. I don't think so. And a lot of issues that women are having as well is with misogynistic Muslim scholars. You know how many times I've seen women get sent back home because the reasons for divorce in the eyes of those scholars are petty. The reasons are petty. Say astaghfirullah, sister, and go back home. Fear Allah and your husband and go back home. Pray for your husband, sister. The actual problem is not getting resolved. I used to watch those Islamic channels where people used to call in with a fatwa request. And she would say something like, my husband's always beating me, Sheikh. And I don't have anywhere to go. What do I do? And he'll sit there and he'll be like, Astaghfirullah al-Azim. La hawla wa la quwwata illa billah. Ukhti, what are you doing to make him beat you, huh? Why is your husband so unhappy with you? What are you doing for him to beat you? That is what I used to hear on fatwa channels. And she used to sit there and argue the case. No, Sheikh, I'm not doing anything, and this and that and this and that. And then she'd get into an argument with the Sheikh. And then the Sheikh would say, you see, all you women are argumentative. Go seek istighfar, ukhti, and go home and please your husband. This is what the Sheikhs used to say on fatwa channels. And I used to feel so disgusted because you're asking the wrong people. You're asking misogynistic people. You cannot go to a misogynistic imam or a scholar or a sheikh to get marital advice from. I'm sorry, you can't. Narcissists, if they do agree to mediation, they will always go to scholars and imams who resonate with their way of thinking. And that's why you find a lot of sheikhs, they stand with the brother. They stand with the narcissist and say, women are difficult, And they tell the woman to fear Allah and her own children. Why are you breaking up the family? You're a mother. You should be more loving and nurturing and caring towards your children. Why are you the one not fixing the marriage to keep the family together? This is what a lot of our Muslim scholars do and say. And that's why our courthouses are so corrupt. There's no emotional intelligence because a lot of our courthouses are run by narcissists, are run by misogynists. So we are facing this serious problem where when women are married to men and they're using these hadiths, it's almost as if they're implying, if you don't please me, if you do not obey me, if you do not do as I say, you will never get into paradise. I am the gatekeeper of your paradise. I am the one who decides whether you go to hell or paradise. Because if you please me, you please Allah. And they feel like they have that authority and that power. They love the fact that they believe that your eternal fate lies in their hands. They love it. This is why a lot of people, they apply for positions of being like judges in particular. If you're applying for, to be a judge, a Sharia court judge, in most cases, people are not considering the sheer amount of responsibility of people that they have to carry, because it's true, their fate does lie in your hands. And if you don't have emotional intelligence, and if you don't have the element of justice, and you don't have a high level of iman, you can corrupt a lot of people and ruin a lot of people's lives with your very poor judgment of the case. A lot of people take bribes, because again, they are applying for these jobs not out of love for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but love for the power. Like, I'm so powerful, all your lives lie in my hands. The outcome of your lives, they lie in my hands. A lot of people love that power. They don't care about the responsibilities and all the people that are going to hold them accountable for injustice on the Day of Judgment. They don't care about that. They're not thinking about that. And it's the same with husbands. They're not thinking about all the injustice that they're causing against their wives. They're happy to complain to everyone that their wife is so disobedient and so difficult and so argumentative and so feminist. But they don't address the pettiness that comes with it, or that comes as a result of it. And you know what? In most cases, people won't even believe women when they tell men or other women, whoever, how petty their husbands have been. They laugh and they say, nah, oh, come on, it's not that bad. You're just exaggerating. No one can be that petty. But it's true. I've heard the craziest stories. I could do a podcast just about all the petty things I've heard men do behind closed doors that they would never tell people about. But they're more than happy to tell everyone that their wives are disobedient. They know that their wives hate them. My ex-husband knew that I hated every cell in his body. Trust me, he knew. But he still enforced his rights upon me. And he still enforced his understanding of Islam on me, because he wanted me to ask for permission for everything I did. Every tiny thing. Even if I wanted to call his mum and ask her if she was okay, I had to ask for his permission. You don't call anyone without my permission. You don't visit your family without my permission. You don't do anything without my permission. Once I actually ordered something online and it got delivered to the house via a courier, and I went to take the parcel, and when he came home he saw the parcel on the table and he said, "What's this?" And I said, "Oh, it's something I ordered online." And he said, "When did you order it?" And I said, "Oh, last week." He's like, "How did it get delivered?" I said, "The courier came and dropped it off." He went mental. He went mental because I did not ask him permission if I could open the door to the courier to accept my parcel. And then after that, he banned me from ordering anything online unless he was there himself to take the parcel. Now, in Saudi, when you take parcels from couriers, they actually leave it by the door. So you don't actually come out onto the street the same way you do in England. So we had a gate, and by the gate, there's like a place where you can put parcels and things like that. So there's no interaction. There's no interaction with anyone else on the street. But the level of pettiness reached that. And, women get sick of it. Women over time get really sick of having to deal with a complete control freak. And then you start to panic. The woman starts to panic. Like, I need to get out of this because I'm suffocated. I'm losing myself. I'm losing my life. I'm losing everything good about me. I'm not able to do anything. I can't go out with friends anymore. He keeps banning me from everything, saying no to everything. And he justifies it as being protection. He justifies it as, like he always used to justify it. I mean, I wasn't even allowed to go to the mall by myself to do any shopping because he said, "You might get kidnapped by somebody." Like seriously, when I say petty, I mean petty. And like I said, I'm sharing all of this because a lot of men do not understand. They do not understand why women cannot be submissive and obedient. Stop forcing people to be submissive and obedient. Women are not slaves. There is no slavery in Islam. If you're not happy with that woman, if she is that argumentative, if she is that disobedient, if you feel like she's possessed by every jinn on this planet, just divorce the woman. Why are you putting yourself in a position where you're with someone who doesn't want to be with you, can't stand to look at you, hates the bones off you, but somehow you kind of want to force that woman to be obedient just because you feel like you can, or because you've got children? You're going to be responsible for all the childhood traumas your children are gathering while they watch and observe this Netflix show of a toxic marriage, because they're going to get affected by it. But of course, narcissists don't care. Narcissists don't care. I can say this till I'm blue in the face to narcissists. They won't care. They don't care about anyone but themselves. And that's why it's in the hands of the victims to actually do something about it. If you cannot obey a man in critical, circumstances, and you cannot be that submissive feminine woman, who takes care of herself and she's happy in her youth and her beauty, and you just feel relaxed around a guy, you feel safe around a guy, you feel like you would do anything for that man. If you're not in that situation, then unfortunately your iman is going to take a really big hit. Because what's happened to a lot of women is the more they hear these Quran verses and hadiths being manipulated and distorted in a narcissistic way, the more they start to resent the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for making men this way. For giving men this authority, not realizing that it's these men who don't understand the position of being al-Qawwam, and what it truly includes and what it truly entails. Not every man is fit for marriage. Just because he's hit the age of puberty and he's grown a beard and he's 6'4" does not mean he's ready for marriage. If a man does not have emotional intelligence, do not marry that man. If that woman does not show you any signs of her being grateful for the life that she has, do not marry that woman. If she's not grateful for the life she has now, she will never be grateful for the life you give her later. That's a fact. And I didn't finish the breakdown of the ayah in Surah An-Nisa, verse 34, when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks about, if you fear ill conduct from your women, then, there's 3 stages of discipline. You speak to her first, and then, you separate beds, and then you discipline her gently. But I'm telling you, good men won't even get to that. They won't even get to that stage. If a good man will know, if a woman doesn't want to be with him, if she hates him, he'll just divorce her. Because he has enough self-esteem and dignity to not accept that for himself. If you're that unhappy, girl, khalas, just go. I'm not going to hold you hostage in this marriage. If you don't want to be with me, I'm going to go and find someone who does want to be with me. Because that man has dignity for himself, right? He's not going to accept being with someone who hates him. A narcissist, on the other hand, is totally fine with it. The more you hate him, the better, actually. Because he can see how that is crippling your life and crippling you as a person. The hate is making you so unhealthy. It's giving you illnesses. It's making your hair fall out. It's making you a bitter person, an angry person all the time. That's what he wants to see. He wants to see you self-destruct, with that hate. So a narcissist, you might find it very strange how a narcissist can live with a man or a woman they hate them very much. They don't care. Because they won't leave until you are completely broken by the hate that you have for them. But a man with dignity will have no problem letting you go, or a woman with dignity won't have any problem letting you go. Because they also know they deserve better. I know I'm a good person. If you don't want to be with me, it's fine. There's no problem. Allah ma'ak. Right? So, the 3 stages of discipline, I think I'm going to have to do another podcast about this because, again, misogynistic Muslim men, abusive Muslim men will take those to the extreme. They will take it to the extreme how? Number 1, it's not just... The first stage is not healthy communication, communicating what the problem is and how you're distressed about what they're doing. No, stage 1 is screaming, shouting, tantrums, yelling, all of that stuff, right? Yelling, abuse and gaslighting, and that's stage 1 for a narcissist. Stage 2, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says separate in beds. Now the reason why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says separate in beds is because when you're husband and wife and your wife loves you, but she's done something to be, really disrespectful or hurtful to you, when you leave the marital bed and you go and sleep somewhere else, she'll feel that. She'll feel that. She'll feel bad and she'll miss you. And she'll feel that empty space. And it will give her an indication of how much you're upset with her, and it will motivate her to do something about it because she doesn't want to spend the next night without you as well. Okay, she will understand the seriousness of it when you no longer even want to sleep next to her. So it's that feeling of seeing someone go and sleep on the sofa, and it's not nice. That's for a normal person, right? Now for a narcissistic man, he will be like, I'm going to get a second wife. And then he'll go and talk to loads of other women, and he'll go and sleep around, he'll go and cheat, he'll go back to his ex, he'll do something really stupid to not only separate from the bed, but actually go and find someone else's bed to share as well. Okay, that's stage 2 of what they do. And they will do it for a long time as well. Oh, that silent treatment will go on for days, even weeks sometimes, until you learn your lesson. Okay? The third stage is the light discipline, where the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, he showed that the light discipline was like the tapping of a miswak on the Sahabi's shoulder, because the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ said that it is forbidden to hit a woman, a child, or an animal. So clearly, this verse does not mean to beat your wife or to hit your wife like misogynistic men interpret it. So a narcissistic man in stage 3, well, he might even skip stage 1 and stage 2 and go straight to stage 3 and give her that slap or give her that punch and so on and so forth, because narcissists, they're the only ones who get involved in domestic violence and physical discipline. So they see that ayah, that verse in the Quran, as justification and a green light to beat up their wives when they're being rebellious and disobedient. Okay, taking everything else into context, you can now see how toxic this is, because it's not about the wife not wanting to be submissive or obedient. It's because she hates him so much as a result of everything that she's been through, because not only is he not being a qawwam in his full element, he is also abusing his authority and using Islam to justify his unwarranted authority. So that's basically a breakdown of why a lot of women cannot be submissive and obedient to the husband, because I'm telling you, it's in a woman's nature to be that way. And a woman will only be that way with the right man. So I hope, inshallah, that's given you some clarity and, and maybe a new perspective, new insight into the subject matter. I can branch off this subject into other areas, such as, like I said, there are other things that I would like to focus on, such as what happens to women when they've got nowhere to go after a divorce, the problematic, situations that people find when they want to leave a toxic marriage, like how to actually leave someone so abusive. All of that, inshallah, I will address in further podcasts. So I will leave it there, because I think, inshallah, that has gathered all the information that I wanted to put across to you. Please do like, share and subscribe to this channel. If you find my content helpful, please share it with people who need to hear this and understand it. And I really do pray that, even if one man wakes up to this, one man who is in this situation of being an abusive husband wakes up to this, wallahi, I'll be so happy, alhamdulillah, even if it's just the one guy, because it is so important that this information is out there, because this is information that a lot of scholars and a lot of imams brush under the carpet and refuse to address. Women don't have a voice. I feel like a lot of men do not want to listen to women when they argue this. They're always shut down on YouTube channels. Like when they're arguing with other red pill men about it, they're always shut down. They never have their voice out there, because the red pill men are always trying to be more dominant and more, more intimidating in these arguments and debates. However, I am more than happy to debate any YouTuber about this. I'm way up for it. But it's been 2 years and no one has challenged me on anything in my book. No one's challenged me on anything that I've written or published in my podcast. So I am open to it, though. If anyone wants to, I'm more than open to it. And inshallah, I will leave it at that. So I hope you've enjoyed it. Thank you so much for listening, if you are still with me until now. And until the next podcast, inshallah, assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.